Welcome to this week's episode of Sojourner, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Welcome back to the ongoing series, How Spaces Define Masculinity, a Black and Black Biracial Men's Initiative. My name is Carol Jean Matthews-Shifflett, and I am the CEO of the Sojourner Group. I'd like to start by thanking my sponsors, the Utah Jazz, Planned Parenthood Association of Utah, Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resource, PCAR, the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, UCASA, and Enlightened Productions. In Session 3, I'm bringing you 3 men who will speak to you from the LGBTQI+ perspective. Dr. Cleveland Hayes, Associate Dean of Academic Affairs, Professor, Indiana University, Indiana, active member of the American Education Research Association, AERA, an active reserve of the United States Air Force, and his foundation, Meridian, Mississippi. Next, we have Dr. Kenyon Anderson, MSW, PPSC, founder and president at Always Progressing, Inc., and his foundation was Long Beach, California. And lastly, we have OBO Jones, a content creator, entrepreneur. His foundation, Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome, gentlemen. So basically, in our first conversation, we had someone address Black men, and then he did say Black homosexual men later, but he had a problem with white men raising Black boys in the society. He said, I'm troubled with it. He didn't say that he was against it, he was just troubled with it, and I got that. So we're trying, what is your take? Again, we don't have a problem with you adopting Black boys because Black children are not being adopted at the rate that they need to be. But how do you feel about white men raising Black boys and what they need to do? Are you frozen? Oh, there you go. You're on mute. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're back to you because you didn't get to answer this question.
I was saying I wholeheartedly agree with everybody.
You were saying ditto to all of them.
Ditto to everybody. I agree with everything they said. Nothing else can be said. They hit the head on the nail on the head.
Nothing to add?
Nothing.
Nothing to add. Okay. All right. So I think you all have answered this question, but if you'd like to elaborate, how do you think your masculinity has changed over the years? Your personal masculinity. So we'll go ahead and, are you ready to go with that, Dr. Jones, or do you want me to move on? I think you're ready.
Come on, Dr. Jones.
I called you doctor again, didn't I?
Listen.
That's a sign. You know that's
putting that in the atmosphere, so you need to go ahead and hook that up. Go ahead and hook that up. And there's some places in Atlanta, Georgia State. And I know some really good sisters at Georgia State to get you the hook up. So go ahead and make that happen.
Okay. Email me afterwards, Dr. Hayes. We'll have a conversation. Wait, I'm sorry. The question one more time. Sorry.
How has your masculinity changed over the years? You may have answered this already, but if you want to elaborate, if so, just explain.
No. For sure. I think I've taken responsibility for my masculinity, right? And I think in a community where you don't have to always, there's a lot of our masculinity is attached to other people, right? Like, who can I get to do this? Especially even within the gay community, there's this top and bottom conversation. There's this mass versus femme. There's this no facts, no facts. There's a lot of things that then can compartmentalize this version of masculinity. But for me, and not to be whatever, but me being abstinent now, I've realized that a lot of my masculinity was associated through sexual activity, right? So it's a lot of it was in my man downstairs. And so for me now to then have to say, okay, well, I'm not even on the pursuit for these sexual interactions. I'm not even on the pursuit for men in that way. Men aren't sexualizing me in that way anymore. All the things I've had to really get to the nitty gritty of, like, where do I root my masculinity? Is it in a sexual prowess, or is it in who I am? Is it in money? Is it in what I can do? And so for me, I root my masculinity in how I'm oriented to help, right? So like, it is who I am gonna be fruitful for somebody else. And that to me is when I feel the most masculine, when I'm providing some value to someone else, whether it be monetary, whether it be conversation, whether it be advice, whether it be food, whether it be a spot in the gym, whatever it is. I just feel like for me, I feel most masculine when I'm able to provide value in any way. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to do? Thank you for that. I'm going to jump to Dr. Anderson because what I'm hearing or my understanding is a generational thing. And so I want Dr. Hayes to answer this question last. So I'm going to go to Dr. Anderson and I want to, how has your masculinity changed? And then when you hear Mr. Jones's response, and you said that you're not much older than him. So we'll just go ahead and let you answer. Then we'll go ahead and let Dr. Hayes respond.
I'm holding on to my 20-somethings. Joking. I really agree with a lot of what you said in terms of taking responsibility. For me, my masculinity is more associated with my purpose and how I could utilize my masculinity to create space. So I find myself in teaching and mentoring, really talking about how I utilize my advantages as a male in some space and acknowledge the privilege that comes with that, while in other spaces, acknowledging that it doesn't exist. So for me, just sort of being aware of how I actively present and my truth and like, and my purpose. So I think that the things that really make a big difference for me is that like, I'm doing what I feel like I'm called to do. And I feel like that they're taking away masculinity and femininity, the greater thing that I can contribute to the world is operating within the purpose that I have here. So when I'm doing that, I feel like my most at self, and I guess that's probably when I'm most masculine.
Okay. Okay. All right, Dr. Hayes. And I called you on you last because when I heard Mr. Jones's response, now again, I'm older, I heard something generational, but maybe I didn't hear it maybe it was just me.
Not that much older.
you keep telling me that. Okay.
You know, for me, I don't think that I ever equated my gayness with masculinity. And so over the years, and there's still sometimes, like this past semester, maybe 2 semesters ago was the first time that I like came out to my class. It'd be like the first day of class in terms of this is sort of kind of my identity, and this is who I am, and this is sort of kind of how I operate. First time ever, and I've been in the academy 14, 15 years. And so I've never done that. And so because I want for whatever reason, I never, and that could be just sort of kind of just past trauma, et cetera, in terms of why I haven't done that. So my identifying my masculinity, and then when I put on my Air Force uniform, that sort of kind of defines sort of kind of my masculinity as well. And then so now I'm like, oh, how you in the military and you can't be gay and all this kind of stuff. So long story short, I don't have a really good answer to that question because I just I just don't think about it that way or haven't processed it in a way. I don't have a good answer to that question. So I'm gonna stop trying to fake one like I do.
All right, thank you. All right, boy, we're moving along pretty quickly. If you were to speak to your younger self today or a younger boy in the community who might be struggling, what would you say to yourself or to him about what you've learned about how you would have view masculinity today? Now, from your perspective, and then definitely from your perspective as a Black man in American society. Because we've seen right now, we're seeing murders left and right. We're seeing that children are so conflicted of where they are in society, where they fit in society, be it gender, be it ethnicity, be it, gosh, I'm trying to think of more. But what would you say to a young boy today or to your young self today? We'll go ahead and start. We're going to start this one with Dr. Hayes, and we're going to go down to the youngest person on the panel because, you know, Mr. Jones is still young. So go ahead, Dr. Hayes.
You know, if I had to go back and sort of kind of think about my younger self, I probably would have embraced who I am much earlier than I felt like I could maybe. I don't know, maybe I've taken a little more risk around that, and I didn't, because like when I was in my mid-20s, I wasn't living at home. I was far enough away. I was on my own. I was making my own money, and I didn't have to worry about sort of kind of the consequences of coming out. And remember, talking about generational, this was in the 80s for me. And that last, I don't know if anybody ever watches Pose, but I get so emotional when I watch that TV show, because those kids could have been me. That's my generation.
What's the show?
Pose on FX.
Okay.
And it's about ball life in New York in the 80s. And I'm watching these young Black men in this particular show being kicked out of their homes and tricking on the streets of New York and having to do all this, living, sort of kind of developing a family, et cetera. And it really, that's one episode, even now, that I cannot watch without start crying. Because I just think about that so could have been me. And so if I had to go back and I would tell my younger self to maybe take, why you have to be cautious around that. I also can recognize that I also knew I couldn't take care of myself. So I did a lot. I was in a position not to be on the streets and et cetera. So I had to probably tell my younger self to be a little more of a risk taker around certain things that I was afraid to take risks out of fear of not being able to, trying to be my authentic self a little bit more.
Was that fear from family? Was that fear from friends?
Everybody.
Just a little bit, a side note, I remember when you came out to me, and I remember you telling me that you were afraid that I would not let you be around my kids anymore.
Right.
I remember that fear. So that fear was of a whole lot of people. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Dr. Anderson.
This is another big question. As I thought about this, like literally my stomach is at a pit right now, and thinking about what I would tell myself.
If you're uncomfortable, don't.
No. It's fine.
Okay.
I'm fine, but just sort of thinking about what the question itself. I think that if I was talking to my younger self, so like 12, 13, I would tell myself that I don't need permission to just be happy and to be me. I think at that time there was like a lot of like pressure to conform, and I was becoming aware that there might be something going on. And sort of like for me at the time, it just wasn't an option. Like I could not be a Black young gay man. It wasn't a thing. And when I think about the torment that I face internally as a result of processing and dealing with that, for me, and I look at like what I've been able to accomplish and what I do now, and even my work, I'm actually about to put out another children's book project called Pride, centered around the conversation that we're having here. And I think about all the accomplishments that I've had, and I think about being young and sort of feeling like I can't exist as my full self. That's for I can either be a fragment or like, God, just take me. So to be at this point where I've worked with so many people, I run a mentoring program, I was the director of a college access program, like I have literally worked to uplift my community. And I think that my fear in terms of not being transparent is that some kids do choose to take their lives. For them, that is an option. Thankfully for me, it wasn't an option, but I do remember sort of the feelings of just like not wanting this. Like if I could just, take it off and sit it to the side and be normal, I really felt like then that was something that I would have given. I would have been like, you know what, I'm gonna just be straight, I'm gonna placate, I'm gonna be happy, and I'm just gonna do things because it would have made life a little simple in some ways. And I think that looking at my life now, I'm graciously able to just be proud of my full self. And I know that if I could have told myself that, I wouldn't have believed it. I would have thought like, you're actually crazy. People like us don't do that. That's not a real option. And I was way too safe. For good reason. To go back to Dr. Hayes' point, for me, it was like, you know, home stability or gay. And there wasn't a choice for me. I wasn't that tenacious. I wasn't going to risk the negative things that could have come along. So like being at this point now, maybe teaching myself to be a little patient and like to sort of know that things will actually get better in time and believing it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if my younger me would have believed it, which is the thing that I'm conflicted with.
Yeah, and that's a really good statement. And that's a good segue into asking Mr. Jones the same question.
I'm trying not to cry.
It's okay to get emotional.
Nah, yeah, I think maybe because I am younger, it wasn't that long ago. So I you know, and thinking about what I would tell my younger self, I'm thinking about my younger self, right? And I think that's the he needs to hear so much that I don't even know how to really like say it in a way that's like concise. But I think all in all, I would tell him to take his power back. You know, I think I allowed so many people access to the way in which I moved. And I think it just became so normative for me that it then like perpetuated how I maneuvered up and through. And I think there's this, I don't know if it's a study, but there's this thing that says that gay men go through a second adolescence, right? Because we suppress who we are for so long that when we finally then come into our own, it's like you're a whole new person after figure these things out. Sorry, did I just go out? Sorry, guys. But yeah, you have to figure you're this new person who you're trying to be out. Because even with me, like I used to always proclaim to be private, right? I'm a private person naturally, but then now in me interacting with myself, I'm not private. I was just running. It was fear. It's a difference, right? There's a difference between privacy and secrecy, and I was more trying to be secret because I was afraid of who I was coming to the forefront. So like now having to unlearn who I had to be to then be who I actually am is a whole new can of worms. And I would just remind my younger self, like, A, half of this stuff won't matter in a minute. Half of this stuff won't matter. Half of the people, and people matter, but these people won't matter to your life. And so to then give them so much responsibility over who you are and who you groom yourself to be is a big task for them and a very regressive task for yourself. And so I would just keep reminding him that, like, keep loving on yourself. I have a brand called God Loves. It's a t-shirt brand. And I had an email from a guy after a podcast I did not long ago, and he was talking to me about how he was uncomfortable supporting it because of his sexuality. And he was like, I just don't think that God loves me. And for me being in spaces where I thought that, okay, I'm going to own my sexuality, because, you know, I had the attraction before I acted on it, right? And I think for a lot of us, we felt like, I'm not that gay yet. I haven't done anything with these desires. So I'm kind of like, you know, I haven't touched a guy, so I'm cool. And I think when I acted on it, it was like, okay, well, all right, God, I'll holler at you because I'm now absent of your protection, right? And I remind him that you are not, that the foundation of who God is love, and you're not outcasted from that because of who he's created you to be. And yeah, so I would tell my younger self a lot, and I don't want to keep rambling, but it's a lot, yeah, for sure.
Well, you said take your power back, and when you're talking, that's what you would tell yourself. And I think about younger kids, even today, still struggling about coming out. Taking your power back, okay, love yourself. How do you even teach them to love themselves when society is telling you so many other things?
It sounds so cliche, but I think you legitimately have to contend that I cannot allow anyone else's anything to dictate how I choose to move. Even when Dr. Hayes was saying earlier how he, you know, a few semesters ago decided to live his identity and not to call your age out again, be 51. And there's this constant space of having to almost re-invite trauma into your life, because even then, like, you're not out in every space. There's gonna be a new person that has to then figure out who you are. And there is a level of, like, no matter how old you get, of like, what is this gonna result in, right? And so then you have to remind, and for me, even now, I have to remind myself, like, again, don't give them that much responsibility for who I am. And there's gonna be a lot of moments that present where you have to then correct people or say who you are. And that may have it for the rest of your days, but as long as you remind yourself that no one else's perspective is more important than your own, I think you'll then win.
Okay, all right.
Can I jump in there?
Sure.
seems like we're all a part of spiritual community here. There's this notion of agape love. Ooh, watch out. There's this notion of agape love, which is like the perfect love. And as I've learned more about myself, I have to love me for my good, bad, and ugly, and indifference, because this is the only me I have. So when we're teaching people how to love themselves, we have to teach people how to love without limits. This should start at home. It does not always start at home, but like really being able to, if I lost my left eye, then being able to be like, you're still cute from a right side glance, and being okay with me and how I present in every way, shape, form, and facet. And it really starts from like the smallest, most encouraging things. Like, if a kid maybe is not the smartest kid in the class, it's okay not to be the smartest kid in the class. Mm-hmm. But you'll be great when you find your thing. Really pushing people towards their purpose, pushing people to see their glory internally. And it is something that can be fostered. Unfortunately, oftentimes people are loving with limits. I work with a lot of parents, and they're like, well, what do I do if my kid wants to do this or my kid wants to do that? Well, you love the kid that you have. You can't love the kid that you wanted in your mind, because that might not be the kid that you have, and that's okay. But really removing those limits so that you're able to sort of foster that. And I think that as we accept our imperfections and we live and we breathe them, and we're like, this is a part of my journey, not the defining moment of my story, then we're able to truly move in that direction. But we have to sort of teach that to young minds starting very early. You are perfect as you are, and you could always get better, but you get better in your time and in your calling. You don't have to get there because I'm there today. Get there on your own time and love yourself in the process.
Or because society says it has to be a certain way.
Yeah, and I do a lot of mentoring, and like for the earlier side of 25, I had like this checklist of like, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids, I'm going to buy a house, and these destination moments are going to make me happy. And really relinquishing that checklist and just being like, if those things never happen, I still want to be happy and whole.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, Dr. Hayes.
And one of the things, I'm looking at this last question, and I'm also looking at Avis's response in the chat. So and sort of kind of following along with my esteemed colleagues on the panel, is that I will never forget when that little black kid in Alabama killed himself. And it was all over Facebook, and it was all sort of kind of conversation.
When was this?
This was maybe 6-8 months ago.
Okay.
And I saw that, and I came across my Facebook feed because I sort of kind of traveled in those circles, and I saw that, and I took that prime opportunity to say, as Black folk, as it comes to our sexuality, as Black, and when it comes to sexuality, especially with young men, is that we have to do better. We have to do better. And I took that moment, which was a huge risk to me, because I still get some sort of kind of apprehensions about sort of kind of outing myself like that. I don't know why. I mean, it's 2020 and the water's fine and I'll be fine. But I still have those moments that I'm like, oh, this is giving me a little bit of anxiety, because then I'm going to have to sort of kind of, I'm still feel like I'm going to have some risk or whatever. So anyway, I took a risk, and I said, and that was my moment to sort of kind of just like come out to the world. I just came out to the world. It was on Facebook for God and everybody to see. And I said, when I was in 8th grade, there was a kid, and I didn't name the person who was doing the harassed me unrelentlessly. And many of you, and I said, I'm putting my classmates on blast. I say, because you all knew it was happening. No one sat around, and everybody sat around and let this person harass me relentlessly because you in your own mind had some sort of kind of issues around gayness or whatever the case may be. And I wasn't even sure who I was. I was 13 at that point. And this young life was taken. He took this life because he had been harassed because of his gayness. And I said, we have to do better. And you all sat around, all my so-called friends sat around and let this person harass me unrelentlessly for a semester until he got indefinite suspended. And, you know, like I said, I rejoiced when it happened. So, because it was ended. I mean, that trauma was over. So, as a result of that, I think whatever we need to read or whoever we need to talk to, and I think I was having a really, really good conversation with a really, really good friend of mine. I think the more that we sort of kind of come out, and this is in going back to why I started, you know, so when I sort of kind of identify myself in my class as this queer, radical Black scholar, so my students know the discourse that I'm coming from when I'm teaching them. It's also, it stops the conversation. You don't have to gossip about it. You don't have to wonder. Now you know. You can talk about something. You can talk about something else. Can't talk about this. And so even in my reserve unit, when Don't Ask, Don't Tell went away, and I could freely be out, I came out. So now you know, because I know they had been talking about it around in the corners. So now you know, I don't have to. So my point is that I think to your last question on the thing, if anybody take away from anything, is that we have to do better in terms of embracing our young folk who are sort of kind of, you know, why are you kicking your kid out of the house because he or she is same-sex or trans or whatever the case may be? And that's just so, I think that makes no sense to me. And so we have to, I think, as a culture of people, and I just see names, so I don't know how people present on the call, but as Black folks in particular, not that I'm putting all our business in the street, but we have to do better as it results, as it comes to how we treat young, gay, lesbian, trans folk better. And then sort of kind of going back to Avis's question is that, first of all,
you want to recite the question? You want me to read it?
It says, I'm interested in generational differences with Cleveland being a generation or so older than Abio and Kenyon. Can he speak to the differences he observed in how gay men were accepted into or marginalized from Black community and the broader community? So generational. So I'm all over the place with that because I was too Black to be white, too white to be Black, and so how do you? I didn't know. So and then when I came, and sort of kind of navigating gay spaces, and what is interesting, what I think is such an oxymoron. First of all, I think gay community is an oxymoron because there's no gay community. There's no community in gay spaces, in my opinion.
Not like gay community spaces.
So I try not to use gay and community in the same sentence. I may use gay spaces or gay conversations or whatever.
Okay, you just educated me.
So, and what is interesting, the theme song for gayness is "We Are Family," and so I kind of struggle with that, and so how gay has become so. The Pride movement was started off by a Black trans person. And that history, if it's not for other Black people sort of kind of telling that history, like, in true transparency, I love RuPaul's Drag Race. It is problematic, and I critique the hell out of it, but I still watch it. Because I need moments that I just have no brain or TV, that I need to turn off my analytical brain, and RuPaul's Drag Race is one of them that I watch. So on the anniversary of Stonewall, all she wanted to talk about RuPaul was Judy Garland. Like, wait a minute, Judy Garland had nothing to do with this. This was Marsha P. Johnson, I think was her last name. And I went to her Facebook page and I posted, I was like, you got this all wrong. You got this all wrong. So, so for me, I had to spend a lot of time, effort, money in terms of therapy and having conversations to really, really make sure that I have myself grounded in who I am as an individual, and all of this other stuff around me, I either ignore, or if I choose to interact with it, I do. And if I don't, I don't interact with it. And I'm totally okay. And I've always prided myself, even when I lived in Salt Lake and I first came, and that's where I came out in Salt Lake City, and you don't get no whiter than that other than Maine.
Vermont,
and trying to not falling into being like everybody else, not having ran the same fragrance, or not just so much is sort of kind of making sure that I keep grounded in my own identity, which I think has allowed me to sort of kind of move through spaces in ways that I don't have to sort of kind of And I also think it's very important, going back to the question around, talking to young people, is that, yeah, okay, you want to come out, that's fine, but be sure that you recognize you have a strong sense of who you are, because it's not this just welcoming and warm embracing that you're going to get. You may not, if you get it, great, but you may not get it.
Okay. I have another question. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
With one thing, just about the younger generation piece. I think that what needs to also change, I agree with the whole bullying space, but I also think this language needs to shift, right? I think we're kind of reminded of how patriarchal, how misogynistic the community is based on language. And so for me, like, I would appreciate, of course it's far-fetched, but I would really like to see a space where you ask young people, do you have a crush at school? Not do you ask young boys you have a girlfriend or girls you have a boyfriend. Just ask, do you like anybody? Right? Like, are you liking anyone? Like, make it a little more ambiguous so they can come to you. But I think we're reminded of who we're supposed to be from a very, 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 very young age, right? Before you even know who you are, you know who you should be. And so it makes it very difficult to then find or groom your actual self, because I'm reminded, okay, well, you're asking about girls. I'm seeing boys, but I'm assuming I'm supposed to see girls because I keep getting asked about girls. Or, I don't really like blue, but blue is everywhere I look, so I guess I like blue. All the things that are like socially constructed to then be like what we're supposed to do. I think if we kind of make it a little bit more ambiguous, even getting a baby boy yellow, I don't know, but making it a little less like on the nose, you know what I'm saying? I think would help people feel more safe. I think a lot of young, especially queer kids, just simply don't feel safe in their skin, in their community, in their homes, anywhere. They don't feel a foundation.
Okay, that brings me to a question that I received that I myself been struggling with, just because I think kids get confused. The question is, curious to know your thoughts to the panel on a new parenting style, raising children in a non-binary way. Now, my struggle with that is I think that they've got this message coming over here, and kids are cruel. Kids are sending another message. And I think when they are met with that, where do they go? So go ahead and elaborate on that, please.
Oh, go ahead. Let I answer about that.
Okay.
I can take it. So I think this goes back to the point that I made earlier about loving the child that you have. There are strong attempts to categorize. So like even the non-binary is a category. We're gonna do all of these things to just sort of provide you with like a framing. In my mind, I think as people get to better know their children, then they're able to provide them with the framing that's appropriate for them. So I think that with kids, they need options. Most kids are, born, and if you have the means, you're like, I'm going to paint the room blue because I'm having a son, and pink because I'm having a girl, but utilizing sort of neutral colors until they're at a point where they can sort of explain to you who they are. Parents are like, oh, I'm having a daughter. I bought 1,000 little dresses for her to wear that she's not going to do anything but spit up on. And the child may not embrace that. So sort of leaving room for the child to be able to define who they are in their fullness, and like honoring that they're little people and their little opinions form who they believe they can trust. So if there's no space for me to be ambiguous because the questions are very direct and the format of what it looked like is very direct, then you sort of leave kids in a space where they're unable to identify themselves. And to me, that's more dangerous than anything else. So it's like, don't make it about you. If your kid is like, hey, you know what? I want to cut my hair, and they're a little girl and she want to fade, let her get a fade. Let her figure out what the expression of the herness is, and don't make it about you. Parents, I don't have kids yet, but I hope I don't make this mistake. Don't make it about the kid that you dreamed about. It's about that kid. So leave space for them to be able to be themselves, or be okay with the fact that you may be drawing a wedge that can't be fixed.
Okay, you left me a little bit speechless here. Only when you said parents don't make it about the kid that you dreamed about, because when I hear that, not what you said, just the question itself, I think, I'm trying to make it about protecting my kid. First, I got to protect you as a Black kid. Now, I've got to make sure these little bullies at school, I got to protect you, because I know, you know, and I know, we all know, kids are the biggest bullies in the world. And so this is just a mother speaking. That's all. This is just a mother speaking. That I want to make sure you're safe.
My response to the being safe is, those are conversations that we can have with kids when they're at, like, you know, a kid at 5 years old can understand. I love you no matter what. This is the rules of the world. This is sort of what's expected there. Whatever you decide, I'm going to do the best in my ability to protect you. Okay. But that is a conversation that can be had. In the absence of having a conversation and creating a space for a conversation, we create toxicity, where it's like, not only are we not communicating and having an open conversation, but you're not willing to hear me because you're prioritizing your version of my safety. I'm really concerned about the kids who operate and have nobody to talk to and come home and kill themselves because they're being bullied. Okay. Because in some of the cases, and I think you heard this on the call today, I thought I could be different, but I didn't know I was gay. Not at that age. I was just different. And the differences that I recognized told me that it wasn't safe to talk to those who were supposed to protect me. So when people were doing stuff at school, did I come home and talk about it? Well, no, because I was acting gay, and acting gay is not a part of the rules. So we don't talk about me being bullied for this particular thing. And there's a loophole in how you're able to protect because you don't know.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Sorry.
No, it was great. It was absolutely fantastic. I am learning a lot here. Okay. Thank you. Cleveland, would you like to, or Dr. Hayes, would you like to go next? Or would you like to pass it on to OVO and come back? What would you like?
I don't. Dr. Anderson summed up everything else who kind of wanted to say. I don't have nothing to add to that.
All right. Okay. We'll move on to you, Dr. Jones. I'm putting it in the air. Putting it in the air.
I mean, of course, what Dr. Anderson said was perfect. I think kids are individuals, you know, and you have to learn them as such. I think we use boxes. And for me, I always try to look at it half full, right? Like, I assume the intentions are in the right place, right? You want to provide safety, you know what I'm saying? Like, I assume that the intentions are decent, but it creates a lot of confusion, to be honest, right? Because, like, even for me, like, I've never been bullied, right? Because I wasn't, you know, I wasn't going for that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't have bullied me if I was a young kid.
Guys,
you know? So, but I'm saying, though, I think, like, but that didn't alleviate the personal trauma, right? So, like, there was still something inside of me, whether I was getting it through experiences at school or whatnot, like, that was still being suppressed. And I think there is, like, a really, really big conversation that needs to be centered around letting go of the kid that you wanted and embracing the kid that you have. And I think that was just perfect what Dr. Anderson said. Like, I think a lot of people, and I don't even know how to really go about that, because in my mind, I do think, like, okay, well, what is parenting? Like, what is rearing a kid, right? Don't you kind of give them principles that you think are good and positive? And so, like, where's the line between giving them good principles versus allowing them the autonomy to be themselves? So it's like, I can understand the confusion there, but I do think that there has to be something that changes, because there are a lot of kids who don't have it. So, yeah.
So for Black culture, you know, that whole concept is what? I mean, seriously, some people get it, but me as a Black mother, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I got to work with this. I got to learn how, you know, I've got people who are having children now, the his, her, the pronouns, and it's like, oh my goodness, okay, I'm trying. So thank you.
I want to acknowledge something that was just said by the future doctor on the call. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the attempts have to be made and they have to be genuine. So it isn't a matter of reconstructing the entire way that you parent, but it is saying, you know, hey, what do you like? And I know that, like, you know, for parents, it's like my way or the highway for some parents. You know, my mom trumped a lot of stuff. It's like, I said what I have to say and that's it.
Yep.
But still being able to have boundaries, because kids need boundaries, but boundaries with conversation, boundaries with, I want to know who you are. I want to speak to you. Not like when we spend quality time together, we watching TV and nobody's talking. So, like, there's a portion of developing healthy conversations that we have to get used to having, and also having difficult conversations starting at every age. Unfortunately, as a group, and this is my opinion, we don't have the luxury of waiting to have difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. Like I think that you do a better job at, if you know early on, like, okay, so my kid is gay and they told me at 6. So now we figure out collectively how we operate. Mm-hmm. Versus you experiencing the world by yourself and you tackling and learning that you can't rely on other people.
But then parents have to start believing kids. I think that's the really issue too. Parents don't believe children, and like, because even for me, I think my dad is on here, so I'm trying not to give him too much. But like I came home when I was 7. I was in first grade. I had a crush on this kid named John Crossan III. He had a part in his hair. He was just that. Anyways, and so when I came home, my parents asked me how school was. I told them there was this cute boy at school. The whole thing. I think at that point there were kind of antennas going, but there was no restructuring. There was no like, let's kind of groom this, right? There's this still kind of like, maybe he'll grow out of it. Maybe that wasn't what he meant. And this kind of like subtle hope that he will kind of identify or find his way back into liking females exclusively. And we're going to just kind of cross our fingers until we have to then be met with, oh, shoot, like he really is that. And so like, if you don't really have a space where it's like, who you are legitimately is okay, right? And who I want you to be, I can let go of, then it's going to be very, very difficult to like truly allow your kid to be all of the things.
And I think you hit a good point, Ovio, when you said here, because if your kid comes home at 6 years old and said there was a cute boy, you're probably going to go, what? And you're just going to keep passing it on. You're not even going to give it a second thought. So like, okay. And then you just keep moving on. So
yeah.
Thank you. Those were great responses. So lastly, before we close up, what would you like for listeners to take away from today? Go ahead. We'll start with Dr. Jones, the future Dr. Jones. Yeah, we called it out.
Dr. Jones, yeah. I would say love people, and I think like that's kind of really where it stems from. Don't think for people. Ask questions. It's okay. And I think even within the gay community, I think, community, Dr. Hayes, I didn't mean to. But within the gay spaces, there's even this like mirror that we hold to heterosexual land that I think we could do ourselves a service by letting that go. And that doesn't mean doing away with all the things that heterosexual people do, right? Like there's this really big conversation around monogamy versus being in an open relationship, right? Like, well, monogamy is what straight people do, so you don't have to do that. I think you can take what you want from it and leave what you don't want. But I think I would like to see a space where we stop holding heterosexual or straight people to like as the barometer, right? Like, okay, like that's what they're doing, and that doesn't happen over there, so it shouldn't happen over here. And then continue to ask the questions, continue to find language, and when you learn language, use it. I think a lot of us are learning terms, and I've heard both other panelists talk about being cisgendered, and I found out what that was like last year. I don't know how new the term is, but again, when we find language, we kind of get initially turned off to it, right? Because we're like, more things to know, right? Like, LGBTQ, IAP2+, all the things, and we're like, I don't want to learn no more. I'm not using that. I'm not using this. But again, like if we're trying to create spaces or trying to like throw, rocks in the wind, like we're trying to figure out what happens. I think being active in the progression of finding out why the things are the things and being active and progressing the conversation is necessary. So be rooted in love, be kind, and don't play with all the gay people, because some of us not ones to be played with, huh? Oh, I thought somebody had said something.
Was that masculinity there? Was that the masculinity?
I'm just saying, everybody not that, huh? But okay, I'm done.
Okay. Who wants to go next? Who wants to?
I'll go. So I want to echo what you just said. I think that we need to operate and be rooted in love and kindness. If you do not have the capacity to love or be kind, just mind your business. Just, live your life over there and don't come where you haven't been invited. I think that we sort of have this culture of people needing to feel like that things have to be agreeable. And I don't need you to agree with anything. You cannot agree, just don't come to my door. So I think that like just as a base, if you cannot move forward to the point of love and compassion, just get the hell out the way. Don't stand in the way of progress. Don't stand in the way of people living their lives because you have your stuff. Because honestly, unless you're a client and I'm your therapist, I'm not here to deal with your stuff. Those are your things. So take them where you may and just let it be. And I think that like that is sort of a lesson. Like even as if we're talking about parents and family members and other things, like just go. Like I don't need you to come here with that. And I think that it's safer that way and it's more peaceful. And when we get to a space where as people, we can just say, you know what, people can live their lives and do what makes them happy, and it's genuinely not my business, then we would be a lot better off. So love, peace, kindness, and minding your business.
I like that honesty. I really do. Thank you. And lastly, you know, I saw, as you two were talking, I saw Dr. Hayes leaning back, kind of like the elder in the group, listening. So now it's time for him to go ahead and wrap it up. What would you say, like for listeners to take away from this, Dr. Hayes?
Other than what I've sort of kind of already shared, I just sort of kind of echo, and I would agree. And I think, and I thought I had it down here. That's what I was looking for. And you can say what you want. You know, there are people who have issues with bell hooks, and for a whole host of reasons. I happen not to be one of those people who have issues with bell hooks. And she wrote this book around. They really sort of kind of talk about this Black love. Mm-hmm. And I would recommend anybody who really, really wants to, and I can't think of the name off the top of my head, otherwise I would show it, and I would recommend everybody to get it and read it. Because I read it last summer as a part of me just sort of kind of my own growth and understanding, first and sort of kind of developing myself. And I think self is so, when you sort of kind of have a sense of grounding in yourself and who you understand and recognize that a lot of these labels, gay, straight, bi, all that stuff is all decolonized language, and sort of kind of we start rethinking ourselves to be just our authentic selves, to be able to then love. I think we can authentically love other people. So I recommend getting that book by. It's something about love.
Is it The Will to Change?
I just posted it. It's called All About Love.
That's it. That is a powerful book. And I would recommend anybody to read it, because it's intersectional, which means she talks about gay, and that you cannot be about Blackness, for lack of a better word, if you dislike women or gay or trans or this or that. So I think that would be a really, I found that book to be really, really sort of kind of powerful.
That book was given to me by Dr. Wilfred Samuels, who just passed away. He said, you definitely need to read this book. And so it is a good book. You know, and OBO, one last thing. You made a comment about holding heterosexuals basically at this level of authority. And I think we as African Americans tend to do that with white society. If they say it is, then it is. And when I said at the beginning of this conversation, I was struggling with LGBTQI, I'm like, who did that? Who came up with that term? Was it a Black person? Was it? And so that's why I felt like I needed to talk to Black men and their response on the LGBTQI and Black communities, because I know our culture, and our culture can be very challenging with this whole
and I commend you for even holding this space, because I think there's this also unwritten rule that gave, like even as I did that, straight people have the ability or the authority to approve or disapprove is really like mind-boggling to me. Like, I don't approve of who you are. I don't approve of this. And whoever told you I wanted your approval? I never asked you for your approval. Like, I don't recall ever asking anybody to approve a lifestyle choice, to authenticate me, to affirm me in any way, you know. But I think there is this space of like holding them as the standard, and then them being able to make the rules and tell me what I am and what I am not, and all the things. And so there is like this weird scuttlebutt around it. But yeah.
Well, I want
to this is the book I was talking about in the chat. This is the one.
You're talking about another one. Oh, Salvation, Black People and Love. Oh, okay. Haven't heard of that one. Thank you. Hope everybody got that. It's called Salvation, Black People and Love by Bell Hooks. I want to thank all three of you. I've been looking forward to it. I've been a little nervous because I was using the wrong language. This has been absolutely fantastic. You have, I hope, enlightened the audience to a lot of information that they didn't know about in the first place. There's going to be a survey for anybody who is online. We'd love for you to fill out a survey. If you want a part two, I'm sure these gentlemen will come back and talk to you sometime because they have really given us a lot of information. Again, I want to thank the Utah Jazz, Planned Parenthood Association of Utah, PCAR, Pacific Island Knowledge to Action Resource, the Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and Enlighten. Enlighten will be breaking these down into short versions so that we can put it on YouTube. So it will be coming on YouTube. It's just taking a lot of work to get it all done so we can have these conversations. Again, we are still looking for young people to talk about masculinity. We don't have a lot of young people that are receiving this invitation. Maybe they're not sure what their masculinity is right now if they're 20 years old. I don't know. But if you know anyone, please send them our way because we would definitely love to have them. So thanks again for joining us and have a good day and have a good weekend, everybody.
Stay tuned for the next episode on How Spaces Define Masculinity, a Black and Black Biracial Men's Initiative.